Okay, hello, and thank you everyone for tuning in. My name is Mana Berikyan, and I'm an associate editor at Glimpse from the Globe. Today, I will be joined by Arshak Makichyan, a climate activist from Moscow whose work on climate activism and more recently anti-war activism in light of Russia's invasion of Ukraine has led to his arrest, subsequent exile, and now a case against his Russian citizenship. Mr. Makichyan is joining us today from Berlin, Germany. Mr. Makichyan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
Of course. So to start off, can you please tell me a little bit about your work as a climate activist, including the activism tactics you employed and protests you have staged in the past, and how your work ultimately led to your arrest?
I was organizing Fridays for Future in Russia. Climate activism was, a little bit different in Russia than in other countries because it's a fossil fuel state, like most of the incomes is coming from fossil fuel. So yeah, people didn't know anything about climate like 4 years ago when I started, and a lot of weeks I was the only activist that was striking every Friday. And then I started to organize the movement. It was also very difficult because, in Russia, people are afraid to do activism. They don't know how to do activism. So, and there was no knowledge about climate. Yeah, so there is nothing about it in schools and in the universities usually. So, I was learning about climate by myself, and then I understood that it's very important thing, and I started to do something, to raise awareness and to demand from the government more actions. So I was striking, and then we started to organize the movement, which was quite fun, even in Russian reality, and scary, of course. And it was kind of success for us because our movement was growing. And till the pandemic situation, when the government started to use it as an excuse to arrest everyone. So the situation with human rights started to worsen a lot, like 2 years ago, and they declared Navalny and his team extremists. They started to declare almost all independent media foreign agents. So the situation started to worsen, and I was arrested once for 6 days. It was for a 3-person strike in 2019, because the government was saying that the strike was illegal, but I sent the application for it. And I was detained several times after that for different kind of activism.
Right, and how did this usually end? How would you be freed, and then how did your subsequent arrests happen?
Every time it was different. Once I was arrested on political rally, and it was different experience than from being arrested from a single strike. I was doing usually these single strikes because it's the only way to protest without a permission from the government. And but it was not something terrible. It was difficult for me because I was kind of a guy from Moscow conservatory, learning music and these kind of things, and it was scary for me. But nothing terrible happened to me because in Moscow usually they weren't torturing people. If you are not like someone very famous, they need to do it. So 2 years ago it was like kind of difficult for me, scary, but was okay. But now they started to torture people even in Moscow. But since the beginning of the war, they started to do terrible things. Some terrible things happened to my friends, and the situation now is completely different. Like 3 years ago, it was very scary for normal people, without experience, and people who are not ready to go to jail and to talk with strange people, with criminals. It was scary and unusual thing for me to do, but it was not something terrible. But now it's kind of unimaginable what is happening to people who are continuing to do activism, and sometimes they had to go through very traumatic experiences.
Mm-hmm. And how has your activism and the risk involved with your work changed in light of the war in Ukraine and growing repressions in Russia? What motivates you to keep going as an outspoken critic of the Putin regime, despite the increasing risks to do so?
Yeah, the situation was worsening before the war, and when the war started, we started to go to rallies, anti-war protests, and we were having march in the city, and we had quite big protests, yeah. But the situation it was getting worse and worse because Europe and the world was continuing to buy fossil fuels from Russia, and we had this feeling that we are fighting, but they are arresting a lot of people, and they arrested about 15,000 people during the first month of anti-war protests. And the last time when I was in Moscow and we went to this anti-war rally, I was with my friends, 5 of us or something, and we didn't find the crowd because there was a lot of police, there were police trucks every 20 meters, and they were arresting everyone, checking your phone, and so it was kind of ineffective to continue in the same way. And now, after that they had these laws, new laws, and now they can arrest people for years just for calling the war a war on social media, yeah. And they started to torture people in Moscow. They started to do a lot of terrible things. So at some point I understood that openly opposing the government, it's not effective anymore, because Russia was an authoritarian regime before the war. Now it's kind of dictatorship, or it's on its way to being a dictatorship. So now there are a lot of different partisan movements in Russia. They are doing illegal things, yeah, and it's effective if you're not caught. And openly opposing the government, it's not effective anymore. That's why we decided to go to Europe and to continue to raise our voice, and to have interviews and to speak up against Russian regime. And maybe it's more effective for me, because if I would stay, I would be in prison, and it wouldn't be possible for me to raise my voice, because they arrested a lot of people from opposition, and the situation for them is terrible, and maybe it's more effective to continue to speak up.
Mm-hmm. And what motivates you to keep speaking up, even from Europe, where you're now safer than you would be in Russia, and continuing doing this work?
Russian propaganda is continuing its work, and I'm seeing how it works. It's influencing people, even people in Europe, people in free countries. And Russian propaganda is doing its work even in the US. We saw this tweet of Elon Musk, let's have a negotiation with Putin. And now that I know that it's ineffective to have negotiations with Putin. Europe was trying to have negotiations with Putin the last 20 years, And I was saying, you shouldn't trust him, please don't trust him. And Europe was continuing to have calls if Putin had meetings, and Europe was ignoring activists. And so now we have this situation when, Russia is having a genocide in Ukraine, let's call things how they are. And people from Russian civil society have knowledge of how to fight Russian regime more effectively. So I have this knowledge, and I'm trying to educate people in Europe, because they don't understand how activism works in a dictatorship. They don't have this experience of protesting in dictatorship. They're thinking that you can go to protest and unite, and in 2 days you would have a revolution, but it's not working like that. So we have this knowledge. We know that it's more complicated, that the situation in Russia is more complicated, and we are trying to continue our work, even though, of course, it's very difficult to continue to do it. Russian civil society is having a lot of legal troubles in Europe, because it's kind of difficult to get a visa, then it's difficult to extend it, and you need to need to find your way in Europe, because we cannot continue our normal lives. We had losing almost everything, and now we need to survive in Europe, and continuing to do activism is not a priority for a lot of Russian people, because the situation for them is also difficult. But I'm trying to do my best because Russian repressions are continuing. They started this new case against me to deprive me of my only citizenship. So I had to speak up, because this case is not just about me, but about prosecuting all minorities in Russia. It's not like kind of new tool for repressions in Russia. And people, they really don't get what can happen if Russia would use this tool on bigger scale, because they can start deprive people's citizenships, people property, and it can be terrible.
Mm-hmm. So please tell me more about this ongoing case against you in Russia and attempts to strip you of your citizenship. Would you say that the case is politically motivated, and are other factors like you not being ethnically Russian, for example, affecting the case? And what are the broader implications of this?
Of course, it's politically motivated. I got some threats a year ago, like more than a year ago, when I was going to run for Russian parliament. And I started my campaign, and I had an agreement with Yabloko party, and they promised to nominate me, but then they had some threats from Russian government, from like some people connected to Russian government, from special services, and they said, "Oh, Arshak, we decided not to nominate me because we had these threats." And it was in private conversation with someone of some head of the Yabloko party. I got some threats that this kind of case can be used against me, but I thought they lied to me, because I thought it's impossible to deprive me of my only citizenship, because I lived in Russia almost all my life. I lived in Russia since 1 year old, and I studied in Russia, and everything was okay with my documents. And I thought, it's impossible, but in May of 2022, I was in Berlin, and I was thinking maybe I can go back to Russia and to continue to do something in there. And then I found out about this case, and mostly it's because of my anti-war activism, because I was speaking up quite loudly against the Russian invasion, because our wedding with my partner was on 24th of February. It was an accident, and we used the wedding as a way to express our political that we are against the war. I had this "Fuck the war" on my T-shirt, and Polina, my partner, she had blue dress and yellow flowers. And it was kind of a political statement against the war, the wedding, and then it went viral, and we were having a lot of interviews, and it was fun and scary, because we were having interviews going to protest during the first month. And mostly it was because I was speaking up against this war quite loudly, especially on international level. I was having interviews with the biggest outlets like The Economist. Like I took part in 2 broadcasts on Fox News, which was strange for me because I'm a climate activist. And they started this case, and it was a shock for me, and I was shocked, but I understood that this case is something very big, and I decided to speak up, even though they were kind of blackmailing me with my family situation in Russia. So because this case is not just against me, but also against my families, but there was no choice for me, because it's kind of their thing to blackmail people, to silence them, and being silenced was not an option for me, because I do not want to play by their rules. I know that if you are speaking up, then a lot of people supporting you, and you getting more power, and then you can make a difference. And this case is threatening all minorities in Russia. Like there are about 1 million of Armenian people, and there are a lot of other minorities in Russia, and they are afraid to take part in political life. They are afraid to raise their voices. But I think it's very important for us to do it, because if we want to stop the war, we need everyone on our side. And like now, Russian government started, not now, like 2 months ago, they started the mobilization. And no matter what is your nationality, ethnicity, they are taking people from the streets and they are sending them to the war. Yeah, you cannot refuse and go to jail, or you have to go to the war. So they don't care about your ethnicity when you are sending you to the war, but they care about your ethnicity when you are an activist, and they're using it's a weakness for you, because they can use it in their propaganda and say, oh, Arshak was never Russian. Yeah, he was foreigner for us. So yeah, they are using us, my ethnicity, as a weakness in propaganda and in their work, but I'm trying to also to use it against them, because there are a lot of people in minorities in Russia who are silent, and we need their voices, because yeah, now it's not just about politics. Yeah, it's about everyone's lives in Russia and in Ukraine.
Mm-hmm. And how has your identity as an ethnic Armenian in a minority group in Russia impacted you in other ways in the work you do and the types of obstacles that you face? Have you faced discrimination because of it, whether it's in the work that you do or this more recent case against you?
I had a lot of troubles when I was a child. Like we had a lot of or nationalism, this kind of stuff. It was quite a problem in Russia, and now it is now. And I was feeling kind of yeah, I'm not Russian, I have to go to somewhere else to continue my life. And I was a student in Moscow Conservatory, and I was planning to go to Germany to continue my education. Yeah, and I was afraid to take part in societal life, because I never felt myself as Russian. And then I started to do activism, and I felt myself useful. Yeah, I was thinking that I'm doing the right thing. I'm doing very important work, and I felt myself more Russian than people who are Russian by ethnicity, because I was doing very important work for my country. And I started to realize that I am real Russian and they are not. I'm doing important work for my country. I was getting know the country better. I was traveling in Russia. I was traveling to different regions where we have a lot of problems with environment, and yeah, because of coal mining and different stuff. Yeah, I was defending people's rights for good environment. I was defending, yeah, I was fighting for a normal climate policy. And I felt myself really as part of Russia, but of like maybe of new Russia, which will be happening when we will stop Putin and his regime. Yeah. So yeah, I think I'm a Russian Armenian, and yeah, I had a lot of troubles, and every my interview in Russian, I got a lot of comments, racist comments, but it's not a problem for me, because yeah, it's a problem for these people. They are not educated enough. They need to do their work. They need to be not racist, maybe. Yeah. So it's not a problem for me now. Yeah, the government is using this as yeah, instrument to yeah, repress me, but it's not. The problem is not in me. The problem is in them. Yeah.
Thank you. And to close off, what message do you have for younger people who see the work you do and are inspired to do the same?
Russian anti-war movement needs your support. Like, you can help in different ways. Yeah, you know how activism works maybe better than us, but we know how activism works in authoritarian regimes. So maybe we can unite to do our work better, because there are a lot of activists in Europe, there are a lot of activists in the US, in democratic countries, and there are a lot of people who want to do something useful to make a difference. And Russian anti-war movement needs your support, because yeah, all our activists, they feel depressed and they want to continue their work, but they don't know how they yeah, the activism, they don't know how to use these activist tools in Europe to raise awareness about yeah, the situation, the real situation in Russia, because propaganda, Russian propaganda is working worldwide, and yeah, we need to do it the same. So yeah, you can help Russian activists. You can support them. You can support, support them by sharing information about them. You can write them and ask if they need some help. You can organize something with them to raise awareness about Russian atrocities in Ukraine, and it's important for Russian civil society also because Russian regime also is damaging Russia. Because of the Russian regime, our country now is collapsing also. So we need to continue our work because we don't have a choice. We do not want to live on the same planet with Putin because he is a terrible man. So we need to continue our work, even though it's difficult, like because of this war there is like energy crisis in Europe, a lot of other problems, but we have to stop Putin. Because if we want, then the situation is going to be worse and worse. And we know that because we have this experience of living under his rule for 20 years. So we want our country to be free, and you can help us.
A very important closing message. Thank you again so much for spending your morning with us. We very much appreciate it.
Thank you.